Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio from Monday, February 28th, 2022. White House responding to Russian President Vladimir Putin putting his nuclear forces on heightened alert as the Russian war on Ukraine intensifies and U.S. and Western economic sanctions start to hit the Russian economy hard. And another key sanction today, U.S. Treasury Department saying it is cutting off Russia's central bank, banning U.S. citizens, companies from doing business with them. The Treasury Department says it will effectively immobilize any assets of the central bank of the Russian Federation held in the U.S. by U.S. persons wherever located. At the United Nations, an emergency meeting of the General Assembly to consider a resolution condemning Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. And the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky getting on TV saying that his country is applying to get into the European Union. Also, on Washington Today, a preview of President Biden's first State of the Union address scheduled for Tuesday night. And Washington, D.C. gets a second statue in the U.S. Capitol, just like the 50 states. It was unveiled today, a statue of the city's original designer, Pierre Lafont. New York Times' David Sanger and William Broad writing, when Vladimir Putin declared Sunday that he was putting his nuclear forces on special combat readiness, a heightened alert status reminiscent of some of the most dangerous moments of the Cold War, President Biden and his aides had a choice. They could match the move and put American forces on DEFCON 3, known to moviegoers as that moment when the Air Force rolls out bombers and nuclear silos and submarines are put on high alert, or the president could largely ignore it, sending out aides to portray Mr. Putin as once again manufacturing a menace, threatening Armageddon for a war he started without provocation. For now, at least, Mr. Biden chose to de-escalate. That's from the New York Times. A question about this today to the White House Press Secretary, Jen Psaki.
In light of President Putin putting Russia's nuclear forces into special combat readiness, has the United States changed its nuclear posture?
Well, let me first start by saying that throughout the crisis, Russia and President Putin have falsely alleged that it is under threat, including from Ukraine, including from NATO. Neither the United States nor NATO has any desire or intention for conflict with Russia. And we think provocative rhetoric like this regarding nuclear weapons is dangerous, adds to the risk of miscalculation, should be avoided, and will not indulge in it. We are assessing President Putin's directive, and at this time we see no reason to change our own alert levels. But it's also important to remember that even over the course of the last several months and years, when we have had significant disagreements with Russia over a range of issues, Russia and the United States have long agreed that nuclear use would have devastating consequences, and have stated many times, including earlier this year, that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. So we have not had seen reason to change our alert levels, and we are see obvious significant danger in escalatory rhetoric.
The White House Press Secretary, Jen Psaki. The Sun newspaper in Britain has this: Vladimir Putin's troops are looking to surround Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, after attacks by advanced forces were repelled in fierce battles. Satellite pictures provider Maxar Technologies said the convoy on the eastern edge of the airport contained hundreds of armored vehicles, tanks, towed artillery, and logistics support vehicles. Reports as well of rockets from Russia being launched into residential neighborhoods in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, killing dozens of civilians. For an assessment on how the war has played out so far, a question at the Pentagon to the Press Secretary John Kirby.
John, what's your assessment of the Russian military? What have you learned about the Russian military from this last 5 days?
You know, I think it's too soon for us to have some sort of sweeping conclusions about the Russian military here in day 5.
It doesn't look very modern.
I would just say a couple of things. First of all, make no mistake, Mr. Putin still has at his disposal significant combat power. He hasn't moved all of it into Ukraine, but he's moved the majority of it. He still has a lot that he hasn't moved into Ukraine. It's combined arms, and it's not insignificant, Jen. Number two, yes, they have faced setbacks, and they have faced resistance. You got to hand it to the Ukrainians, who have been fighting very hard for their country and making an impact and making a dent on Mr. Putin's abilities. But they will learn. The Russians will learn from this. We expect that they'll that they're. We haven't seen any change in what we believe their desires to move in Ukraine, and so they have suffered setbacks. But I don't think we can just assume that they're going to stay set back, if you will. That they will try to work through these. The resistance and to work through the challenges they've had on the logistics and sustainment front.
The Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby is briefing with reporters. Over to the State Department and a briefing there with spokesman Ned Price, an update on the sanctions against Russia, including the announcement this weekend of barring many Russian transactions from the international banking clearinghouse called SWIFT, and also the announcement from the U.S. Treasury Department of freezing assets of Russia's central bank held in the United States.
As President Putin continues his premeditated, unprovoked, unjustified, and unlawful war against Ukraine, the United States, along with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to hold the Russian government accountable. Indeed, leaders from around the world are working together to further politically and financially isolate Russia, including by blocking Russia from international financial systems and economies. We took further measures against Russia's financial system in response to the Kremlin's flagrant violation of international law and utter disregard for the principles that underpin peace and security around the world. We have sanctioned Putin himself. We are disconnecting key Russian banks from SWIFT. We have imposed restrictive measures against Russia's central bank. And we are standing up a joint task force to find and freeze assets of sanctioned Russian companies, oligarchs, and other government officials. These actions will severely impact Putin's inner circle, impede the Kremlin's use of its international reserves, and limit its ability to fund ongoing destabilizing activities, including the Kremlin's war machine in Ukraine.
The State Department spokesman Ned Price at his briefing. The value of the Russian ruble, its currency, falling more than 25% as the effects of Western sanctions are taking hold. Also, the Russian stock market closed for at least 2 days. State Department also saying today it has suspended operations at the U.S. Embassy in Belarus and authorized U.S. diplomats at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow to leave voluntarily. They said it was for safety and security. And the Biden administration announcing it'll be revoking diplomatic privileges for about a dozen accused Russian spies. Spokesman for the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations saying the U.S. has informed the Russian mission we are beginning the process of expelling 12 intelligence operatives from the Russian mission who have abused their privilege of residency in the U.S. by engaging in espionage activities that are adverse to our national security. White House saying that this has been in the process for months, but happens to fall right as the Russia-Ukraine tensions have heated up. U.S. Congress back from recess and many members of Congress calling for additional sanctions on Russia. Speaking on the House floor today, Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, and John Joyce, Republican from Pennsylvania.
Last week, I led a bipartisan group to visit Lithuania and the OSCE meeting in Vienna, Austria. In Lithuania, we met with the leaders and assured them of America's Article 5 responsibilities and commitments in case Russia comes into Lithuania. They are very concerned. We met with our troops, who are 6 kilometers away from Russian troops stationed in Belarus. We then went to the OSCE in Vienna, and we led a strong response to support for Ukraine and opposition to the unbelievable invasion by the cruel Vladimir Putin. The European community was united, except for Russia and Belarus, in opposing the intrusion. Vladimir Putin is not operating in a rational manner. His KGB history, his extreme response to COVID have driven him to a delusional, paranoid, and dangerous state. It concerns all. I appreciate the actions of our president in supporting our country. I support President Zelensky, who is the Maccabee of his era. But the candles only lasted so long. We need to get him more oil. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman yields back For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to rise and address the House.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, right now we are witnessing the violent acts of a Russian dictator in Eastern Europe. Vladimir Putin is attempting to rehang the Iron Curtain and murdering innocent women and children who stand in his path. To help put an end to the war, America must stand united with the free people of Ukraine and continue to provide them with the lethal aid that they need to defend themselves. It's time for the United States to stop the flow of Russian oil to the rest of the world and impose harsh sanctions against Russia and its leaders. Vladimir Putin and corrupt Russian oligarchs must know that they will pay a steep price for their unwarranted aggression. It's time for President Biden to allow for America to become energy independent again and share our resources across the world. Energy independence means national security. Now is the time to promote American energy, and now is the time to stand with the Ukrainian people. Thank you, and I yield.
Congressman John Joyce, Republican from Pennsylvania. Before that, Congressman Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, as the House back in session after a week-long recess. On Wall Street today, the Dow down 166, but NASDAQ up 56, S&P down 10. Now to the United Nations. This from Reuters News Service. The 193-member United Nations General Assembly began meeting on the crisis in Ukraine on Monday ahead of a vote this week to isolate Russia by deploring its aggression against Ukraine and demanding Russian troops stop fighting and withdraw. The General Assembly will vote this week on a draft resolution similar to text vetoed by Russia in the 15-member Security Council on Friday. No country has a veto in the General Assembly, and Western diplomats expect the resolution, which needs two-thirds support, to be adopted. That from Reuters. One of the first speakers was the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
According to UNHCR, 500,000 Ukrainians have fled across the country's borders. Although Russian strikes are reportedly largely targeting Ukrainian military facilities, we have credible accounts of residential buildings, critical civilian infrastructure, and other non-military targets sustaining heavy damage. This escalating violence, which is resulting in civilian deaths, including children, is totally unacceptable. Enough is enough. Soldiers need to move back to their barracks, and leaders need to move to peace. Civilians must be protected. International humanitarian and human rights law must be upheld. The sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders must be respected in line with General Assembly resolutions. Mr. President, we are facing a tragedy for Ukraine, but also a major regional crisis with potentially disastrous implications for us all. Yesterday, Russian nuclear forces were put on high alert. This is a chilling development. The mere idea of a nuclear conflict is simply inconceivable. Nothing can justify the use of nuclear weapons.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Today's UN General Assembly meeting was, as CBS News reported, a rare emergency special session, first of its kind in 40 years, only the 11th in UN history. It was authorized by the UN Security Council in a vote this weekend. The vote was 11 in favor, 1 opposed, Russia, and 3 abstentions. But Russia's no vote was not a veto because it was a procedural vote in the Security Council. Another meeting today. During the General Assembly meeting, the Ukrainian ambassador, Sergei Kyslytsya.
Big militarized powers seeking for geopolitical greatness has launched a full-fledged military offensive against a smaller neighbor aimed at invading the country. Deadly airstrikes dropped on civilians' heads across the entire country, and the Russian troops crossed Ukraine's borders from the territory of Russia, Belarus, and the occupied parts of Ukraine's Donbas and Crimea. Does it remind you of something, doesn't it? Indeed. Very clear parallels could be drawn with the beginning of the Second World War, too. And the Russia's course of action is very similar to what their spiritual mentors from the Third Reich employed on the Ukrainian land 80 years ago.
Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations. Also during his speech today at the UN General Assembly emergency meeting, he read texts that the Ukrainian government says were between a Russian soldier who died fighting in Ukraine and that soldier's mother.
Because I would like to read from the screenshot of the smartphone of a killed Russian soldier. That's an actual screenshot from someone who is dead already. Лёш, ты как? Почему так долго не отвечаешь?
Why has it been so long since you responded?
Вы точно на учениях?
Are you really in training exercises?
Спрашивает мать убитого солдата.
Asks the mother of the killed soldier.
Моменты перед тем, как
Moments before he was killed.
Мама, я уже не в Крыму.
Mom, I'm no longer in Crimea.
Не на учениях.
I'm not in training sessions.
А где?
Where are you then?
Папа спрашивает, можно ли
Papa is
тебе
asking
послать?
whether I can send you a parcel.
Да какую посылку,
What
мама?
kind of a parcel, Mama, can you send me?
Что ты говоришь такое?
What are you talking about? What happened?
Мама, я на
Mama,
Украине.
I'm in Ukraine.
Тут настоящая
There
война.
is a real war raging
Мне
here.
страшно.
I'm afraid.
Мы бьем по всем городам.
We are bombing
Подряд.
all of the cities together, even targeting
Нам
civilians.
сказали, что они
We
нас
were
будут
told
приветствовать.
that they would welcome us,
А они кидаются под нашу
and
технику.
they are falling under our armored vehicles, throwing themselves under the wheels and not allowing us to
Называют
pass.
нас фашистами.
They call us fascists.
Мама, мне очень тяжело.
Mama, this is so
In
hard.
several moments he was killed.
And this was several moments before he was killed.
Imagine, if you want to just visualize the magnitude of the tragedy.
Sergei Kizlytsya, Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations, part of a speech at today's General Assembly special emergency meeting, the first of several days on this resolution that will condemn Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Also speaking today, the Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia. He defended his country's attacks, saying that, as Russian President Vladimir Putin continues to say, the goal is to protect Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the eastern part of the country, the area known as the Donbass, from the Ukrainian government.
During the special military operation, Russia has been exercising its right to self-defense from a regime that has been striving to gain access to nuclear weapons. The president of Ukraine explicitly stated this on 18 February during the Munich conference, and this, I would recall, this statement that he delivered was met with applause by the participants of this conference. At the same time, Ukraine is seeking membership in NATO, where there's Article 5 in effect, and has territorial claims to the Russian Federation. Hence, by leveraging Article 51 of the UN Charter, not only is Russia protecting itself from the nationalist threat, but Russia is also seeking to uphold the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter on the soil of Donbass and Ukraine, ensuring that the main goal of the United Nations be upheld, namely to prevent succeeding generations from a scourge of war. Unfortunately, it behooves us to note the very negative role played in all of this by Western colleagues led by the United States. Instead of compelling Kiev to comply with its obligations, instead they are merely inciting Kiev, egging it on, repeating the senseless mantra that their obligations and the Minsk agreements are not being complied with the Russian Federation, which I should like to recall and emphasize, the Russian Federation is not a party to it. Moreover, our Western colleagues have shamelessly inundated the country with weapons, have sent to the country instructors and effectively incited Ukrainians who are facing a 120,000 strong military contingent prompted them to engage in armed provocation against the Donbass. Thereby, the Western countries have created a bubble that cannot but pop.
The Russian ambassador to the United Nations through an interpreter, Vasily Nebenzia, at the UN in New York City. China abstained at this weekend's UN Security Council vote to hold today's and the rest of the week's General Assembly emergency meeting to consider a resolution to condemn Russia. The other two abstentions in the Security Council, India and United Arab Emirates. At today's meeting of the UN General Assembly, the Chinese ambassador to the UN, Zhang Jun, said that this country is not going to take sides.
The Cold War has long ended. The Cold War mentality based on bloc confrontation should be abandoned. Nothing can be gained from stirring up a new Cold War, but everyone will stand to lose. One country's security should not come at the expense of other countries' security. Still less can regional security be guaranteed by reinforcing or even expanding military blocs. China supports the EU, NATO, and Russia resuming dialogue. Bearing in mind the notion of indivisible security, properly addressing the legitimate security concerns of all parties, including Russia, striving to forge a balanced, effective, and sustainable European security mechanism so as to achieve lasting peace and stability for the European continent.
The Chinese ambassador to the United Nations, Zhang Jun. You can find today's full coverage of the UN General Assembly meeting, and over 100 nations expected to speak over the next 3 days on this resolution. We have it all archived at our website, cspan.org. Associated Press also quoting the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman opposing Western sanctions on Russia, arguing unilateral sanctions have no basis in international law and will make a political settlement between Moscow and Kyiv more difficult. This also from AP, a top advisor to Ukraine's president said the first round of talks with Russia about ending the fighting in Ukraine has concluded and more talks could happen soon. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has signed an application for his country to join the European Union in a bid to solidify his country's bond with the West. Zelensky spoke on TV.
We asked the European Union to admit Ukraine immediately, according to the new special procedure. We are grateful to the partners who stand with us, but our goal is to be with all Europeans and, most importantly, to be equal. I'm sure that's fair. I am sure we deserve it. I am sure it is possible.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in a TV address. He says that application paperwork to have his country join the EU being sent to Brussels, Belgium, headquarters of the European Union. The EU currently has 27 member nations. Washington Today continues in a minute.
There's been much more recognition of the historic contributions of America's First Ladies in recent years. So join us as C-SPAN takes you through the White House experiences of modern First Ladies, from Lady Bird Johnson through Melania Trump. Using material from C-SPAN's award-winning biography series First Ladies and original source material from C-SPAN's video library, you'll listen to reflections of these first spouses explaining how they use their platform to address issues important to them and to the country.
I think everyone that comes to this job comes with a special interest. I was a teacher and a librarian. That's really where I focused a lot, especially at the first, on developing the National Book Festival and helping the president with the No Child Left Behind Act, because that was my expertise, that was my career, and what I'd been interested in my whole life. But I will say that sometimes First Ladies are trivialized by what we call a pet project. And in fact, our contributions to the United States from First Ladies in many, many cases are much more profound than that term.
First Ladies in Their Own Words. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts starting March 5th.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. From NBC News, President Joe Biden plans to use his State of the Union address Tuesday to emphasize the united response by the U.S. and its allies against Russia, while seeking to promote the condition of the economy and sell an optimistic view of the country's future, administration officials said ahead of the address. The article goes on, the president's team has been reworking his remarks in recent days to more heavily emphasize the response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in a speech expected to take place amid scenes of a growing assault on Kyiv. But administration officials said Biden's domestic policy agenda will also be a major focus of his remarks, which are to include a plea to Congress to pass parts of his stalled Build Back Better legislation. That from NBC. President Biden delivers his first State of the Union address Tuesday before the joint session of Congress. C-SPAN's preview program beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern. President speaks at 9 p.m. Eastern, and that's to be followed by the Republican response given this year by Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa. At the White House today, questions about what the president will say on the domestic front to the press secretary, Jen Psaki.
Administration officials earlier today had a background briefing with reporters about the State of the Union coming up. Can you tell us a little bit more? We understood from the call that the president will be addressing elements of the Build Back Better plan when it comes to things like child care and paid family leave. And officials talked about how those things, if implemented, will lower costs for families, but they were hesitant to use the word inflation or say whether that would be addressed directly in the president's speech. So can you say whether the president will be addressing any new policies, not necessarily new domestic programs, but policies that would address inflation directly?
Well, first let me say the president will absolutely use the word inflation tomorrow, and he will talk about inflation in his speech. Of course, that is a huge issue on the minds of Americans. Now, one thing to note is one of the best, most important steps that the Senate could take is to confirm his slate of eminently qualified nominees to fill out the Federal Reserve Board, given they have a very important role as it relates to inflation. But I think what you will hear the president talk about, and I think this is what they were talking about on this call, is how we're going to address costs for the American people and lower costs. And we talk a lot about inflation in here. Economists talk about inflation. The Federal Reserve talks about inflation. Hugely important. How people experience it is what it means for their pocketbooks, for their budgets, for their bank accounts, and how they're paying for things. And that's why a lot of what you're going to hear about tomorrow as he talks about it is how he's going to reduce costs. Now, the Build Back, parts of his agenda that he has talked about significantly a lot over the course of the last several months, lowering costs for child care, lowering costs for elder care, lowering costs for prescription drugs, those are not done yet. So he will reiterate his call for Congress to move forward on those. But I would also note that in the speech, he's going to make clear that one of the best ways to lower costs over the long run is to increase the productive capacity of our economy, to make more things in America with more American workers contributing and earning a good living. He's going to describe the emerging manufacturing comeback with American companies betting on America again because of the administration's commitment to domestic industrial revitalization and technological development. He will also explain that we can also lower costs by promoting fair competition in the U.S. economy, and there are new steps to lower, and he will talk about steps to lower consumer prices and level the playing field for American businesses and ocean shipping, and new steps to protect seniors and other nursing home residents by cracking down on unsafe nursing homes. And he's also going to talk about, reflect on one of the strongest labor market recoveries in American history, and make clear that it's important to continue to take steps to eliminate barriers to good paying jobs for workers across America. So I would expect that you will hear a lot, the American people will hear a lot about how he's going to lower their costs, how he's going to continue to build a strong economy over the long term.
The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki taking reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. U.S. Capitol Police, in conjunction with the U.S. Secret Service, deciding to again put up a fence around the U.S. Capitol. Last time it was up was after the January 6, 2021 violent mob attack on the U.S. Capitol. And this year, during the State of the Union address, several trucker protest convoys heading to Washington, D.C., although some may not actually go into downtown, according to their organizers. Members of the House Freedom Caucus held a news conference about the Biden administration's agenda and what the president may say at the State of the Union address. They were on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania's 10th District. I'm here as the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, and I'm joined by great Americans who have suffered under the president's policies over the last year. And while they are not invited into the Capitol to hear the State of the Union address, as you can see with the fence around here, they're barely even invited into the Capitol, but they are here today to tell you their stories. Now, for the last 13 months, President Biden has told us that he would unite us. He has not. He's told us he would defeat COVID-19. He didn't. He told us he would make America safer. He really hasn't bothered. And he's told us he would rebuild our economy in record time, yet we have inflation beating 40-year-old records. He told us our withdrawal from Afghanistan would not be Saigon. Well, he's right. It wasn't Saigon. It was actually far worse. And all along, he wraps up his abject failures in empty slogans, insisting that he would build back better. But the American people know all too well the only thing he's built back better are our enemies, the Taliban, the Russians, communist China, Iran's nuclear program, drug cartels, murderers, and human traffickers. Millions of American lives and livelihoods are forever traumatized and damaged by his continued negligence and malfeasance. The faces and voices behind this catastrophic administration are ignored by the leftist mainstream media, but worse yet, they are ignored by our feckless president. We, however, in the Freedom Caucus will not ignore them. They are the heartbeat of America, and the Freedom Caucus will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder and fight for them. I want you to hear them, listen to their stories, feel their pain. We're calling on President Biden to finally make the safety and security of America his priority.
Congressman Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, with other House Republicans, members of the Freedom Caucus news conference on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol today. This from Fox News. The White House will no longer require people who are vaccinated against COVID-19 to wear face masks on the premises beginning Tuesday, March 1st, a White House official telling Fox. The lifting of the requirement will come just hours before President Biden is set to deliver his first State of the Union address before Congress. And the White House's decision follows a similar one from Congress's Office of the Attending Physician, who said that masks will be optional on the House floor for the president's speech, likely avoiding the optics of masked lawmakers gathered for the event 2 years into the coronavirus pandemic. That reporting from Fox News. The official announcement about the change in House policy today came from Congressman Ed Perlmutter, Democrat from Colorado, presiding over the chamber.
Chair will take this occasion to update the Speaker's announced policies of January 4th, 2021, regarding the requirement to wear masks in the hall of the House during the coronavirus pandemic. Consistent with updated guidance from the attending physician, the Chair wishes to inform members that masks are no longer required in the hall of the House. The Chair would further note that all members and staff may continue to wear masks at their discretion. This announcement is incorporated within the policy on conduct during a covered period of January 4th, 2021, and supersedes all other announced policies that are in conflict. The Chair appreciates the attention of members to this matter and expects members to continue to respect the health and safety of other members and staff during this ongoing pandemic, including by following current and future guidance of the attending physician with respect to masks, social distancing, and other COVID-related health and safety protocols.
It's Congressman Ed Perlmutter, Democrat from Colorado, in the Speaker's chair today. Now to the Supreme Court nominee from Politico. President Biden's nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, will hold her first meetings with senators on Wednesday, including the Republican Minority Leader and the two top senators on the Judiciary Committee. She will also be meeting with the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, that day. Both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris speaking about the nomination today at a Black History Month celebration at the White House. Judge Jackson is the first black woman to be nominated to the Supreme Court. Of course, if she's confirmed, she'll be the first black woman to serve on the court. First, here is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Black history is American history. It is living, breathing history. History we create every day. And today, of course, our nation faces many great challenges. Among the greatest is the assault on the freedom to vote, the freedom from which all others flow. It will take an all-hands-on-deck approach to safeguard and strengthen the freedom to vote, and the President and I are committed to securing that freedom, as is everyone here. And that is why I felt such pride and such hope, understanding how votes lead to action through elections. It is why I felt such pride and such hope this past Friday when President Joe Biden nominated Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson when he nominated her to sit on the United States Supreme Court. Because as we all know, elections matter. And when folks vote, they order what they want, and in this case, they got what they asked for. I went off script a little bit. And Judge Jackson, of course, will make a phenomenal justice. She is brilliant. She has a brilliant mind and a record of excellence, a record that proves she will administer equal justice. And I don't have to tell everybody here, she has been confirmed on a bipartisan basis 3 times and deserves, therefore, a swift confirmation now.
Vice President Kamala Harris, the first black woman to serve as vice president today during a Black History Month celebration at the White House. President Biden also speaking and mentioning his Supreme Court nomination.
And of course, we see another first in the nomination of Ketanji. Well, you saw her. I guess you saw Justice Brown Jackson, who is on the Circuit Court of Appeals right now. She is an incredible woman. This is a woman who graduated magna cum laude from Harvard. She was the editor of the Law Review. She has done so many other things, but I want to make it clear, not only is she eminently qualified, there were so many others I had to choose from. I can tell you, Jim has supported all the nominees, but the one he most supported was from South Carolina. I've already nominated her to be on the Circuit Court of Appeals, the second highest court in the nation. But Judge Jackson is going to be an outstanding justice. She's part of an incredible group of black women who I've nominated to the federal bench. We've nominated more black women to the federal bench than any administration in the history of the United States of America. Well, I made that commitment when I was running for president, and I've tried to keep that commitment my whole career.
President Biden at the White House for a Black History Month celebration, as February is Black History Month, and every president since 1976 has designated that month as for that purpose. This from Vox Media. The Senate on Monday will take its first vote on the Women's Health Protection Act, a bill aimed at codifying the right to an abortion. Democrats hope to use the vote to show support for abortion rights as they come under attack in numerous states and as they face a challenge in the Supreme Court. But Vox notes this: the vote is widely expected to fail. Republicans are broadly opposed to the legislation and will likely filibuster it. Once filibustered, the bill would need 60 votes to advance, support it doesn't currently have in the 50-50 Senate. Some debate before tonight's vote. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York.
Later today, the Senate is going to vote on a simple yet urgent question. Will this chamber agree to begin debate on protecting a woman's right to make her own health care choices? Across the country, it is a dark, dark time for women's reproductive rights. Last year, we saw the most abortion restrictions passed by state legislatures in a single year. Some of them were almost vicious. The vigilantism of Texas's law I call vicious vigilantism. Many of these new laws are downright extreme, effectively extinguishing women's ability to even exercise their rights at all. And the new extreme restrictions fly largely in the face of public opinion. They also fly in the face of common sense health practices. And frankly, they fly against common decency itself. And sadly, it seems like the Supreme Court is close to drastically restricting this long-established right in the coming months. So the Senate today is going to take action because abortion has never been more at risk in America. Indeed, this will be the first time the Senate takes a vote on a standalone bill to proactively codify Roe. Let me say that again. This will be the first time that the Senate takes a vote on a standalone bill to proactively codify Roe. Every American deserves to know where his or her senator stands on an issue as important as the right to choose. And today's vote will do that.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. Also speaking about this bill, opposed to it, the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky.
With a cascade of major crises testing our country, Senate Democrats are prioritizing a show vote on mandating 9 months of abortion on demand across America. Senate Democrats want to go on record supporting the radical and massively unpopular proposition that we should have functionally no restrictions on abortion whatsoever. Democrats already have the United States, one of just 7 nations in the entire world that allow elective abortions after 20 weeks. This radical fringe policy places us in company like China and North Korea. But now Senate Democrats want to go even further than Chairman Xi and Kim Jong-un. 91% of Americans support some restrictions on abortion during the 3rd trimester. The public overwhelmingly disagrees with Democrats' extreme obsession on this issue. But yet again, our colleagues wish to demonstrate that the radical left fringe runs today's Democratic Party.
The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor. Again, the vote this Monday is a procedural one. It will need 60 votes to advance. If Republicans oppose it as expected, that will not happen. Washington, D.C. now has 2 statues displayed in the U.S. Capitol, just like every state does and has had since the tradition started in the 1800s. Today's unveiling of a statue of Pierre Lafont, the French-American architect and engineer who laid out the city's original plan, also served in the Revolutionary War. D.C.'s non-voting congressional delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, part of the unveiling and taking the opportunity to make the case for D.C. statehood.
Today's unveiling was 20 years in the making. In 2002, I first introduced a bill to give D.C. 2 statues in the Capitol, as states are entitled to have. D.C. commissioned statues of Frederick Douglass and Pierre L'Enfant in the hopes that they would one day join state statutes in the Capitol. However, Republicans fought my bill, calling it tantamount to granting D.C. statehood. I wish it were. It took us 11 years to get D.C.'s first statue in the Capitol of Frederick Douglass, which is displayed in Emancipation Hall. That is certainly the appropriate place for it. Today, 9 years later, D.C. takes its rightful place among the states in the Capitol with the unveiling of the Pierre L'Enfant statue. Pierre L'Enfant fought in the Revolutionary War, which was launched to end taxation without representation and to give consent of the governed. Yet nearly 700,000 D.C. residents are taxed without voting representation in Congress, and Congress has complete authority over D.C.'s local affairs. Statehood is the remedy to this denial of democracy.
Washington, D.C.'s delegate to Congress, Eleanor Holmes Norton, a Democrat, at today's unveiling of the statue. The statue moved from the D.C. government building to the U.S. Capitol's Memorial Door foyer. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. You can get more top Washington stories sent to you each day with C-SPAN's evening newsletter, word for word. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.